I remember the moment I opened that napkin. It had just 6 words written in quick, messy handwriting. Go to the bathroom. Now. Don't tell your date. My stomach turned cold. I looked up at the waitress, and she didn't say a word, just gave me a look that said something was very wrong. My date smiled across the table, waiting for me to take another sip of my drink. I didn't know it yet, but that woman had just saved me from something terrifying. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. This story might change the way you look at strangers forever. My name is Lena Brooks. I'm 27, and I teach art at a small middle school in Seattle. I've always believed in seeing the good in people. Maybe that's why I never saw what was coming that night. After a tough breakup a year ago, I'd finally convinced myself to try dating again. My mom, Marianne, who's always been my rock, said, "Honey, open your heart, but keep your eyes open too." I laughed at the time, not realizing how true her words would be. That Friday evening, I was nervous, but excited. I'd met Ryan Hale, my date, on a dating app 3 weeks earlier. He seemed perfect, funny, polite, and surprisingly genuine. We'd texted for hours every night, talking about everything from travel dreams to favorite movies. He made me feel seen again. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already there, standing up to greet me with a smile that could make anyone feel safe. "You look amazing," he said, as he pulled out my chair. The place was cozy and warm, with soft music and the sound of rain hitting the windows. It felt like a scene from one of those romantic movies I used to love. Ryan ordered wine for me before I even looked at the menu. "You'll love this," he said confidently. I smiled, flattered by his attention. He asked about my students, and I told him about one who painted a city skyline using nothing but shades of blue. He laughed, really listened, and kept steady eye contact that made me feel comfortable. But there was something slightly off. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was how his compliments felt a little rehearsed, or how he'd glance at his phone every few minutes like he was waiting for something. Still, I pushed those thoughts away. I wanted the night to go well. Halfway through dinner, our waitress approached again. Her name tag read Tara. She was friendly, maybe in her mid-30s, with kind eyes that seemed to notice everything. "How's everything tasting?" she asked, but her eyes flickered briefly toward my drink. I didn't think much of it then. Ryan was telling me a story about his last trip to California, and I laughed at his jokes. Everything seemed normal, until a few minutes later when Tara came back to refill our water glasses. As she leaned in, she smiled and said softly, "That lipstick color looks great on you. What's it called?" I smiled back, but before I could answer, she placed a folded napkin near my hand and walked away. When I opened it, the message hit me like a wave. "Go to the bathroom. Now. Don't tell your date." My chest tightened. My hands trembled under the table. I looked up at Ryan. He was watching me, waiting for me to say something. His smile looked different now, sharper somehow. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone calm but curious. I forced a quick smile. "Yeah, just need to freshen up," I said, trying to sound normal. As I stood up, my legs felt weak, and every step toward the bathroom felt heavier than the last. I didn't know what was waiting for me there, but something told me that whatever Tara had seen, it was bad. The moment I stepped into the bathroom, I gripped the edge of the sink and tried to steady my breathing. My heart was racing so fast, I could hear it pounding in my ears. I read the note again, just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. The words were still there. Firm, clear, urgent. "Go to the bathroom, now. Don't tell your date." Who writes something like that unless something serious is happening? My mind jumped from one wild thought to another. Was this some kind of prank? Had Tara mistaken me for someone else? Or was Ryan not who he said he was? I looked at myself in the mirror. My lipstick was smudged, my hands were shaking, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel safe. I thought about calling my mom, but I didn't want to panic her before I knew what was going on. Just as I reached into my purse for my phone, the door opened and Tara stepped in, closing it quickly behind her. Her face was calm, but her voice was low and serious. "Listen carefully," she said. "I think your date put something in your drink." For a second, I just stared at her. My brain couldn't catch up. "What?" I whispered. "No, you must be wrong. He wouldn't." She shook her head firmly. I've been a waitress for 10 years. I know what I saw. He waited until you were looking at your phone, then leaned over your glass and did something with his hand. I didn't see what he dropped in, but I know what that looks like. I've seen it before. My knees felt weak. I backed up against the wall. Are you sure? He seemed so normal. Tara sighed softly. They always do. You need to stay in here. Don't go back to that table. I felt my whole body start to shake. A lump formed in my throat and I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Finally, I managed to whisper, "What should I do?" "I've already called the manager and the police," she said. "They're on their way. We just need to keep you safe until they get here." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I didn't want to cry, but the thought of sitting across from someone who might have planned to hurt me made my stomach twist. I felt sick, thinking about that glass of wine sitting on the table, about how close I came to drinking it. Tara gently guided me toward the staff hallway, behind the bathrooms. "You can wait here," she said. "He won't see you from the dining area." The hallway smelled like coffee and cleaning supplies. It was quiet, except for the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. I sat down on a small bench and tried to steady my breathing. Every few seconds, I glanced toward the door, half expecting Ryan to burst through, smiling like nothing was wrong. From where I sat, I could hear faint voices. Ryan asking the waitress something, then his tone shifting slightly. He was asking where I'd gone. My hands clenched into fists. The charm in his voice now sounded fake, almost threatening. I couldn't see him, but I could imagine the way his eyes might be scanning the room, pretending to be concerned. Tara came back a few minutes later, whispering, "He's asking the host if you said anything before you left the table. He's getting nervous." She glanced at her phone and nodded. "The police are 2 blocks away." I swallowed hard. Should I call my mom? I need to hear her voice. "Go ahead, but keep your voice down," Tara said. When my mom answered, I couldn't stop the tears anymore. "Mom," I whispered, "I'm at a restaurant. Something's wrong, but I'm okay. There's a waitress here helping me." Her voice turned sharp with worry. "What do you mean something's wrong? Are you safe?" "Yes. Just stay by your phone, okay? I'll call you back." By the time I hung up, the sound of sirens was faint but growing louder outside. Tara looked relieved. "They're here," she said. But before the police even entered, Ryan suddenly stood up from his seat in the dining area. The restaurant fell quiet for a moment as he spoke to the host, his tone calm but cold. "She must have gone outside for a call," he said. "Can you tell her I'll wait in the car?" Then, without another word, he walked toward the door. Tara's face tightened. "Stay here," she ordered, and hurried out to meet the officers at the entrance. My heart pounded as I heard her voice explaining everything to them. I pressed my hand over my mouth, terrified he might come back before they reached him. A few minutes later, an officer stepped into the hallway and told me it was safe to come out. "He's in custody," he said. "We'll need you to answer a few questions." When I finally walked out, I saw Ryan through the window being led away by 2 officers. His expression was blank, unreadable, like a mask had finally slipped off. My drink still sat untouched on the table, the red wine glinting under the restaurant's lights like a quiet warning. Tara placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now," she said softly. I could barely speak. "Thank you," I whispered. But even as the police began their investigation, I couldn't shake one thought from my mind. How close I came to trusting someone who looked perfect on the surface, and how a stranger's courage and quick thinking had just saved my life. When the officer asked me to wait in the back office, I could barely feel my legs. The air in the restaurant suddenly felt heavy, almost unreal. The warmth and laughter from other tables clashed with the storm of fear running through me. I tried to focus on the facts, to steady my thoughts, but everything inside me screamed that my night had changed forever. I sat in the small office with my hands clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The truth was still sinking in. Ryan had slipped something into my drink, and if it hadn't been for Tara, I might have never known until it was too late. Tara closed the door and sat beside me. "You did the right thing," she said gently. Her calm tone helped me breathe again. I nodded, still too shocked to speak. I could hear faint voices from the dining area, police officers talking to the manager, the quiet shuffle of chairs being moved, and a few curious whispers from diners who sensed something was wrong. Every sound made me tense up. I couldn't stop imagining Ryan's face when the officers approached him. Was he confused? Angry? Was he pretending like nothing had happened? After a few minutes, an officer entered the room. He introduced himself as Detective Carter, a tall man with kind eyes that somehow made me feel safer. He asked me to describe everything that happened since I met Ryan that evening. My voice shook at first, but I forced myself to go through it step by step. I told him about how we met online, how Ryan ordered my drink, how Tara handed me the note, and what she told me in the bathroom. The detective listened carefully, jotting notes, occasionally asking for small details like how many sips I had taken, or how long Ryan's attention was on his phone. When I finished, he nodded. "You did exactly the right thing by not drinking any more of it," he said. "We're sending both drinks to the lab right now." His tone was calm, but his eyes told me the situation was serious. "We'll also check if he's used any fake names or has prior complaints. You're not the first woman we've heard about tonight with a similar story." That sentence hit me like a punch. Not the first woman. My heart broke a little thinking about how many others had trusted someone like Ryan. The detective asked if I wanted to call someone to be with me, and I said I'd call my mom. I could barely get the words out when I heard her voice. "Mom," I said softly, "I'm okay, but please come. I need you." While I waited, Tara sat across from me, arms crossed protectively, her eyes full of quiet strength. "You know," she said, "I almost didn't write that note. I second-guessed myself for a second. But then I thought, what if I'm right and she needs help?" She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. I'm glad I trusted my gut. I swallowed hard, emotion rising in my chest. "You saved my life," I said. "I didn't even notice what he did." She smiled softly. "Most people wouldn't. That's what makes people like him dangerous. They count on kindness, on trust, but not tonight." When my mom arrived, she ran straight to me, her arms wrapping around me like she used to when I was little. I didn't even try to hold back the tears this time. She whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart. That's all that matters." I could feel her trembling too, but she held it together for me. After a short while, Detective Carter came back with an update. "We've confirmed your date's real name is Ryan Hale, but he's been linked to 2 other reports under different aliases. We'll handle it from here, but we'll need your statement at the station tomorrow." He paused and added, "You were lucky tonight, Miss Brooks. That waitress did a brave thing." Before I left, I wanted to see Tara one more time. I found her near the counter, talking to another waitress. When she saw me, she smiled and came over. "I'm so glad you're okay," she said. I hugged her tightly. "I don't think I'll ever forget you," I whispered. She chuckled softly, trying to lighten the moment. "Just promise me one thing," she said. "Next time you go on a date, order your own drink." That small bit of humor made me laugh for the first time that night. I nodded. "Deal." As my mom and I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a wave. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened under the soft glow of streetlights. A police car was still parked near the entrance, and through the window, I saw officers talking quietly. The sight made me shiver. I thought about the version of the night that could have happened if I hadn't listened to Tara, if I had ignored that note and taken another sip. The thought made my stomach twist again. In the car, my mom drove silently for a while, then said softly, "I always told you to trust your instincts, but sometimes life sends someone else to be your instincts when you can't hear your own." I stared out the window at the wet streets, her words echoing in my mind. I realized that she was right. That night wasn't just about danger. It was about how sometimes a complete stranger can step into your life at the exact moment you need them most. I decided that I wouldn't let fear control me, but I would never again ignore that small voice that says something isn't right. As we turned onto my street, I felt exhausted, but alive. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. I looked over at my mom and said quietly, "I'm okay." She reached over, squeezed my hand, and smiled. "You will be, honey. You already are." That night, I made a promise to myself. I would never again doubt that inner warning, no matter how polite or charming someone seemed. And I would always remember the woman who saw what I couldn't and saved me by trusting her own instincts. The next morning felt like waking up from a nightmare that had somehow followed me into daylight. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's smile across the table, the glint in his eyes as he pushed that glass toward me. My mom had stayed the night, sleeping in the chair by my bed, just to make sure I wasn't alone. The quiet of the morning felt heavier than usual. I kept thinking about how close I'd come to drinking that wine. Just one sip, and things might have ended very differently. By 9 a.m., Detective Carter called and asked me to come down to the police station to give a full statement. I dressed slowly, my body still heavy with fear and disbelief. My mom offered to drive me, and I didn't argue. When we arrived, the detective greeted us with a tired but kind smile and led us into a small interview room. The air smelled like coffee and disinfectant. He slid a file onto the table and said, "Before we start, I want to thank you for staying calm last night. You helped us stop someone who's been hard to catch." His words made my pulse quicken. "You mean he's done this before?" I asked. He nodded. "We believe so. His real name is Ryan Hale, but he's used at least 3 fake names in different states. He meets women on dating apps, gains their trust, then drugs them. Some victims never pressed charges because they couldn't remember what happened afterward. You're the first to walk away before anything happened." My stomach dropped. I thought I might be sick. I looked at my mom, who reached across the table and took my hand. "You did everything right," she said softly, but her eyes glistened with tears she was trying to hold back. Detective Carter continued, "We found traces of a sedative in your glass, a fast-acting one that dissolves within minutes. The bartender confirmed Ryan switched the glasses after you went to the restroom. He's been in custody all night. We're also working with other police departments that have open reports under different names." I sat there in silence, numb, as everything he said sank in. I couldn't stop picturing all the other women who might have trusted Ryan's smile, his soft voice, his fake kindness. The idea made me shiver. It was like realizing that someone you thought was human had been wearing a mask all along. The detective handed me a small paper cup of water. "You were lucky," he said. "And that waitress, Tara, she acted fast. She noticed things most people miss. Without her, this could have ended very differently." I nodded, unable to find words. In that moment, I realized how fragile trust can be, how something that begins with excitement and hope can twist into fear and danger in the blink of an eye. A few hours later, after I signed my statement and confirmed all the details, the detective told me Ryan had requested a lawyer and wasn't speaking. They found several IDs, 2 phones, and a small vial of clear liquid in his car. My heart clenched as he said that. "He planned this," I whispered. "He actually planned this." My mom wrapped an arm around me. "But he didn't get away with it," she said. "That's what matters." When we left the station, the rain had stopped, and the clouds were breaking apart. The sunlight made everything look cleaner, as if the world itself was trying to reset. But inside, I still felt uneasy. I knew Ryan wouldn't be the last person like him. That thought scared me, but it also made me determined to speak up, to share my story, so others wouldn't fall into the same trap. Later that week, I went back to the restaurant to thank Tara again. I waited until the dinner rush was over, so she wouldn't be too busy. When she saw me, she smiled like she already knew why I was there. "I didn't think you'd come back so soon," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I had to," I replied. "You didn't just help me. You stopped him from hurting someone else. I can't thank you enough." She shook her head. "You don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone should do if they see something wrong. Most people wouldn't risk getting involved," I said. "You could have ignored it." Tara sighed and leaned against the counter. "I saw something like this years ago when I was younger. A girl wasn't so lucky. I promised myself that if I ever saw it happening again, I'd step in. You were my second chance to make it right." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but this time they weren't just from fear. They were from gratitude. "You gave me my second chance too," I said quietly. She smiled and handed me a cup of coffee on the house. "You'll be okay, Lena. It'll take time, but you'll be okay." As I walked out of the restaurant, the night air felt softer. The sound of cars passing by and people laughing on the sidewalk reminded me that life was still moving forward. I realized that while Ryan had taken away my sense of safety for a moment, he hadn't taken away my strength. I was still here. I was still breathing. And thanks to one woman's courage, I was alive to tell my story. That night, I sat at home and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank screen for a long time before typing the first sentence of my post. Last Friday night, a waitress saved my life. I shared what happened, hoping that maybe someone out there would read it and think twice, that someone would listen to their instincts when something felt off. Within hours, messages started flooding in, women sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking up. I felt a strange mix of pain and pride. What happened to me was terrifying, but it wasn't going to define me. It was going to remind me, and maybe others, that danger can wear a friendly face, and that bravery sometimes comes from the most unexpected people. As I finally closed my laptop and turned off the lights, I whispered to myself, "You're safe now." But more importantly, I knew that safety didn't come from fear. It came from awareness, from courage, and from never ignoring the signs again. A week passed before I finally started to feel like I could breathe again. The first few nights after everything happened, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. I'd wake up from dreams where I was sitting at that same table again, Ryan smiling at me, the napkin still folded beside my plate. My mom stayed close during those nights, reminding me that I was safe, that it was over, but emotionally, I was still trapped in that restaurant, replaying every second in my mind. It's strange how one evening can change the way you see the world. Before that night, I used to think bad things only happened to people who ignored their instincts. I was cautious, but I believed I could tell who was good and who wasn't. Now I understood that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits across from you, charming and smiling, pretending to care. The police called a few days later with an update. Ryan had a record under another name in 2 different states. There were reports from women who remembered only bits and pieces after meeting him. Some never pressed charges because they blamed themselves or didn't have proof. Hearing that broke my heart. I realized how close I'd come to being one of those stories that ended quietly, without justice. I thanked Detective Carter for everything, and he told me they were confident Ryan would face multiple charges this time. When I hung up, I just sat there staring at my phone, trying to absorb the relief. My mom encouraged me to take some time off work, but I found comfort in going back to my art class. The kids didn't know what had happened, but their laughter and creativity helped me heal. When one of my students proudly held up a messy painting and said, "It's not perfect, but it's mine," something inside me softened. That's what I felt like. Not perfect, but still standing, still mine. A few days later, I went back to the restaurant again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see Tara. It felt important to close that circle, to thank her properly without all the chaos around us. When I walked in, she was wiping down tables near the bar. She looked up, surprised but happy to see me. "Well, look who's back," she said with a warm smile. I sat down at one of the booths and said, "I just wanted to say thank you again, not just for what you did, but for trusting your instincts. You didn't owe me anything, and you still stepped in." She shrugged with that same humble smile. "You don't need to thank me, Lena. You'd have done the same for someone else." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but you didn't hesitate. That's brave." Tara looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, most people go through life thinking danger will always look scary, but it doesn't. It looks like a nice face, a kind voice, a free drink. That's why we've got to look out for each other, especially women. We notice things others don't." Her words stayed with me long after I left the restaurant. I realized how many times I had ignored small gut feelings because I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. That night taught me that being polite is never more important than being safe. It taught me that the people who look out for each other, even strangers, are the reason some stories end differently. As days turned into weeks, life slowly began to feel normal again. The fear didn't vanish overnight, but it started to fade each time I reminded myself that I had survived. My mom called more often, sometimes just to hear my voice. Each conversation reminded me of how fragile life can be and how precious it is to be surrounded by people who care. One evening, as I sat on my couch scrolling through messages on social media, I saw how many people had read my story. Women from all over the country had commented, saying things like, "Thank you for sharing this. I've been in a similar situation," and "Your story gave me the courage to trust my instincts." Reading those messages made me realize something powerful. Maybe what I went through could actually help others. Maybe speaking up was my way of taking back control. I decided to start a small online group for women to share their experiences and safety tips. I wanted to create a space where no one would feel alone or silenced by fear. It wasn't much, but it was a way to turn something dark into something that might protect someone else. The first meeting we held over video chat was emotional. Hearing women talk openly about things they'd kept quiet for years made me see how important awareness truly is. One woman said, "If someone had warned me like Tara did, my story would have ended differently." That single sentence made everything I'd been through worth it. One night, as I was closing my laptop after another meeting, I looked at a picture of my mom and me on the fridge. I thought about everything that had happened, the danger, the fear, the kindness of a stranger, and the strength I didn't know I had. I smiled for the first time in a long while without feeling guilty for it. That night, I finally wrote in my journal, "I'm not just a victim, I'm a survivor, and I'm stronger than I was before." It's strange how something so terrifying can end up teaching you about courage, trust, and the goodness that still exists in people. I didn't walk away from that night broken. I walked away awake. Before I end this story, I want to remind you of something. If something doesn't feel right, trust yourself. Listen to that small voice that whispers, "Get up, leave, or say something." It might save your life, just like Tara's note saved mine. If you found my story meaningful, subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Let's keep spreading awareness and looking out for each other, because sometimes the smallest act of courage can make the biggest difference.